My name is Adam Newport-Berra, and I'm on the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock.
Hey, Ilya Friedman, what is up?
It's time for another fine episode of the Cinematography podcast. I am very thrilled to announce that Adam Newport-Berra, cinematographer for the Apple TV Plus series The Studio, is on the show. And we had an in-person interview because we both live in Portland. How crazy is that?
That is crazy. Well, and also, I mean, like that show is that's like a serious water cooler show. And I always kind of have a weird aversion to stuff about the film industry, but that seems like one of the good ones, although I haven't seen it yet.
And I got to say that friend of the show, Ron Howard, is fantastic in that. He got to exercise some real acting chops and got to play a version of himself that I'm guessing was a ton of fun for him. It's a really great episode.
Yeah, he plays himself as kind of a douchebag, right?
Is really a jerk, which is fun.
Which is it's really I mean, like only someone who is as undouchebaggy as Ron is could play that, could get away with that, because I don't want to say who, but we all have someone in the film industry in our head who we know are douchebags. And if one of them were to play themselves as a douchebag, you'd be like, that's not funny. That's just you. But like Ron is the nicest human being alive.
And it's so perfect for doing it. Actually, Apple usually does not do behind the scenes of any of their shows. Not really. They kind of did a little bit with Severance, was the first one. Mm-hmm. And now they're doing behind the scenes stuff out there for the studio. And they have a BTS of like Ron Howard talking about throwing his hat at Seth Rogen, which is just like such a perfect moment, and talks about how that all comes together. So if you haven't seen The Studio, it's on Apple TV Plus.
I need to see it.
Yeah, go check it out.
Can I admit something? I just got caught up and just watched Adolescence last week. So
I haven't seen it yet. Everyone keeps talking about it. I haven't seen it yet either.
Okay, well, once you see it, I'd like to talk to you about it because I have feelings.
You have thoughts,
but I don't want to ruin it for you. I will say this: it is definitely 4 episodes, each are like 44 minutes. Definitely well spent. Everything is super well done. But I have thoughts. Maybe we'll talk about it on the podcast, or maybe we won't. I don't want to. Anyway.
And now, close focus.
But we have a close focus today that kind of got, like you and I, where a lot of times we're looking for close focus. We're like scanning the trades or IndieWire or something, going like, what is it? And then like in the middle of looking for that, we just started talking about something and we were like, this should be our close focus. So Ilya, you want to tell us what the close focus is? What did we decide to do as our close focus? What do you think is the right way for us to go close focus wise here?
I think we have to talk about 28 years later.
Yes.
We both saw it. And we haven't gone too deep into it. We just talked about it momentarily. We both went to the theater. We both watched it on big screens, I'm assuming. Yep. We both sat relatively close and saw the movie in its, all of its big screen glory.
Yep.
And of course, qualitatively, it's a good movie. I give it a solid B. I enjoyed the movie very much. What did you think of the movie?
I would give it an A-.
A-? Okay.
I loved it. I will see it again. It was not exactly what I thought it would be. I was actually at Sundance when the first one premiered 28 days later, and I was blown away at. I feel like I was really blown away at the look of it because Anthony Dodd Mantle had taken the PAL XL1. He talked about this on the show, a PAL XL1, and he'd shot that whole movie on PAL XL1s, and nobody had ever made like
for those of you who don't know what Ben's talking about, it is an old school standard definition DV camera that kind of did a cheat to get to a progressive. It wasn't really progressive. 25 frames per second.
Yeah, it wasn't progressive at all, but it was closer to 24 frames per second because it was the PAL one than the American version, which was only 30 frames per second. A couple of years later, they came out with the XL2, which I would argue was the best looking mini DV camera ever. Damn fine looking camera. And that one did a proper 24p. They didn't have it back in 2001, I think, when they were filming 28 Days Later. First movie I ever saw that starred Cillian Murphy, by the way. But like what I loved about it, and I feel like this is something Anthony Dodd Mantle excels at, is everything that makes mini DV look like hot trash, he figured out a way to make it look like art. It's not going to compete with 35 millimeter. It's not trying to compete with 35 millimeter, but compared to another film that came out in a similar time, Steven Soderbergh's Full Frontal, which was shot on 35 millimeter and mini DV, it was like giving you a decoder ring to say, these are all the things that make mini DV look like butts. But in the case of 28 Days Later, Anthony Dodd Mantle took that mini DV camera and made something that it felt immediate and visceral and low tech in a good way. And this to me is his strength. It's one of his strengths. He's an amazing DP.
But I think that Anthony Dodd Mantle and Danny Boyle,
of course,
like to
Danny
experiment.
Boyle, yes.
They like to experiment. They are experimenters, and this is no exception. They got to experiment with a new format in 28 Days Later. They got to experiment with a new format,
and that's what I'm kind of teeing up. Yeah.
All right,
so,
you go take us through, Ben. You take us the rest of the way.
Well, yeah. And 28 years later, they came back because there's also we're skipping over 28 weeks later.
Yeah,
for no reason that I've been offered. They skipped 28 months later. That seemed like a perfectly cromulent one that they could have done, but they chose to just go to 28 years later, and now they're shooting on the iPhone. So they've gone from like I don't know if you'd call the XL1 prosumer, but in its day, maybe prosumer-ish.
It was expensive for a DV camcorder. Yeah, but it was not
like
it was
$2,000 or something. Yeah,
exactly, $2,500.
And now they've moved to shooting it on the iPhone. They've shot the whole movie on the iPhone 15. What did you say? They had like 20 of them?
20 of them, yes. And they use them for a variety of purposes. And there's a ton of stuff written about this. And I think that it's good that there's stuff being written about it and there's conversations happening online. But I think it's most important that people actually go see the movie in a theater so that they can be part of the conversation and that you can determine for yourself what that's being said online is marketing, what being said is honest review, and what is just absolutely wishful thinking bullshit. Because frankly, and I'm going to disagree with you actually about 28 days later, just because, and like, look, and I'll tell Anthony Dodd Mantle the exact same thing. I think we did when we interviewed him. The look of that show was not for me. I understand the purpose of it. I sat in the front row during that movie at the Chatsworth, Winnetka 20 when that came out, like opening weekend. And I was like in the very front row. That was the worst place to see that movie. That movie, seeing it in the front row was really.
Seeing almost any movie in the front row of a multiplex is just not a great place to be.
But a mini DV movie on a giant, like 50-foot screen.
Yeah.
And that movie in particular. And you can talk about the art and
think about where Anthony Dodd Mantle was coming from. So he was one of the architects of shooting the Dogma 95 movement. He shot The Celebration, which for my money was the best Dogma 95 movie that ever came out. It was truly moving. And he was experimenting with that stuff even back then. So that's 5 years before this.
He shot the best looking movie I think ever shot on the SI2K camera, which was a 16 millimeter size digital camera a few years later, which was Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah, it might have won Best Picture.
Yeah, exactly. Best cinematography too, if I recall. So look, he is immensely talented. He knows what he's doing. He and Danny Boyle, like, I'm not saying they're throwing caution to the wind. I'm sure that they are experimenting and figuring out exactly how to get the look that they want. And they are embracing the limitations of this format. And I would say
that's what I think he does well, is he looks at a format and he goes, what makes this art? And that's such a subjective thing to say and a pretentious thing to say. But like, if you gave me all the XL1s in the world and whatever resources he had to light, I could not make a movie that looked like 28 Days Later. And with the iPhone, like you and I have had many conversations on this podcast about shooting films on the iPhone. And this is not the first movie to be shot on the iPhone. There was Tangerine, there was Unsane. It's been used for a lot of stuff.
It may be the largest budget movie to be shot on an iPhone, and it's shot, I think, on the most recent version of the iPhone. In fact,
it was the 15.
Yeah, they had 20 of them.
Yeah.
So if you add up the price of 20 iPhones, I mean, we're talking $30,000 here if they're like $1,500 a pop. That's
something like that, yeah.
A lot. So
when you're making even a modestly budgeted movie, like, that's a drop in the bucket. And I don't know that you would have spent that money renting the camera gear.
Absolutely.
You might have.
you absolutely would spent that money renting premium professional gear. And, look, there's lots of things that have been said by both Danny and other members of the crew about like the reason behind using iPhones. And some of them make perfect sense. They want to be able to move quickly. They want to have a small footprint. But when you're making a movie that size and when you're working with, real actors, and it's not it's assumingly it's probably a union production in some way or another. So it's like there are certain creature comforts that don't go away. This isn't the same as Tangerine. It's
Creature
not
comforts. I get what you did.
Yeah, exactly. So, here's the thing. I saw the movie, and while I enjoyed it, solid B, enjoyed the movie, I'd say it's 30 to 40% out of focus. It is a movie that when I'm looking at it on this screen and judging it critically based on what's in front of me, a lot of that movie's out of focus. And then
I will totally see that movie again. And you and I were talking about this beforehand. I did not notice it being out of focus. I kind of took, there's like a softness to the, I'm guessing, over compression or lack of fidelity that's just inherent to filming on the iPhone.
I give you that. But, Wired Magazine did a story, I think just 3 or 4 days ago on with an interview with Danny Boyle. And in there, he acknowledges very clearly, and I'll just read this word for word from the Wired article here because I think it's illustrative. Danny says, there's some major disadvantages to using the iPhone. Mostly due to Apple's user-friendly camera software. You have to override the working system, the director says. For example, the iPhone's camera automatically focuses on whatever it assumes is the focus of your photo or video. That's a useful feature for snapping quick selfies, but for a film director, it's a problem. It is most assuredly a problem. And I got the feeling that I don't know how many of their iPhones they were using at a time to shoot what they were doing, but sometimes there's a shot that's in perfect focus, and then there's like a reaction or a slightly different angle, which is clearly out. And I felt like because there's so many shots that are out, it is a stylistic choice. It's like they said, probably when looking at dailies or probably when they were doing this, here's a limitation. We're going to work this into the feeling of the story. And that's perfectly valid if you don't mind looking at a movie that has a lot of out of focus.
That's interesting. I'm definitely going to see it again, and I'm going to look for that. That was not my takeaway from the look as I saw it. But I'll definitely watch. I mean, I plan on seeing it again in the theater. And I was wondering how much of it had been monkeyed with in post, like in terms of adding visual effects or, doing, whatever voodoo they do in the grade to kind of get the look that they want. But I took it all as, this is just me, as kind of a painterly look. And I feel like it's a movie that I appreciate however they got it, iPhone or what, like, I don't give a shit what they shot it on is the truth. But, sure. But I feel like it doesn't look like anything else I've seen in the last several years. And I feel, like we've been moving in this direction of, movies like Sinners, movies like Oppenheimer, IMAX, higher fidelity, and then also on the digital end, like crisper. And it was interesting to see something that was just fundamentally shot on something that can't achieve what any of that does. And so they go in a different way, in an Anthony Dodd Mantle way with it.
Well, here's my feeling, my 2 cents. I think that there is something wonderfully liberating about a small form factor. I would argue that the creator using the FX3 would have been the way to do that. Even with all of its limitations, there's so many more advantages you have to a small mirrorless camera than you do to using the phone.
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I have definitely seen this movie before, though, because like I remember in the wake of Dogma 95, many filmmakers who were like, why am I wasting all my time with like props and lights and like, making it look and sound good, when I feel like they were grotesquely misunderstanding the point of Dogma 95. Like there was a real point to it.
Agreed.
And I think that we saw it happen with the mini DV revolution. I think we saw it happen with 3D, where it's like James Cameron can make it work, so shouldn't every movie be 3D? It's like, no, maybe James Cameron nailed it, and unless you're like inspired as he was about, like, I mean, nobody gets into the nut meat of tech like James Cameron. And, if you're inspired like him, then go for it. So to me, it's always like, I guess like I always see people taking the wrong lesson from a success, and I think the wrong, even when we talked to Oren Sofer and Greg Fraser about The Creator, it's like they were saying at that time, as was Gareth Edwards, I'm not saying go out and buy an FX3 and make a movie on an FX3. I'm saying find the tech that works for your movie. And I feel
what's interesting? A lot of people went out and bought an FX3 immediately. That's what happened.
Perfectly fine camera to shoot on.
Absolutely.
But I'm not down on the FX3. And I've never been against shooting a film on the iPhone. If that's what you got, or if there's something aesthetically about the iPhone. I mean, like we're all constantly, those of us who have iPhones. I know you're an Android person, and I'm sure you're constantly shooting video and pictures on your Android. I mean, like it's like constant. Like my kid had a friggin' party yesterday, and I shot all kinds of crazy slow motion stuff at this party. It's good practice. It's fun.
Yeah. There's something wonderful and freeing about being able to pull something out and hit go and know it's probably going to be, for the most part, okay. It is that same sort of like automatic stuff, though, that drives real professional, highly accomplished, strong amateur photographers crazy, because when you're used to working with let's say a DSLR or a camera that's all manual, that it's so easy to go, I'm going to set my exposure here, set my focus here, and go. But you can do that on the
iPhone with the Blackmagic software. It's free, and it makes everything completely manual.
Yeah. But I would say it's not nearly as friendly, fun, or intuitive in the way that like working with the proper tool is. It's still using a wrench. It's using a wrench as a hammer. It's like you can do it. You can hammer in something with a wrench, but using a hammer is just a way better experience.
Well, I would love, I don't know if we can get Anthony back on the show to talk about this, but I would love to talk to him about this because I love his work, as you know. Like when we started this podcast, he was one of the bucket list people that we were talking about. Maybe we could get him on the show.
I think we could probably have him come back to talk about it.
I think he's one of the best, but also like I love the fact that he returned. And like Danny Boyle returned to Train Spotting, and I was not a big T2 Train Spotting didn't do it for me. And I was a little apprehensive about this because it was like this is the second time Danny Boyle's going back to the same place and making a sequel to his own movie, and I was just totally caught up in this world, and I was with it the whole way.
And you know what? I really loved the ending. I thought it nailed the ending. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to.
I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but it's got a great ending.
I've heard there's another one that's like due to come out too. I heard there's another movie.
Well, I know this is the beginning of a trilogy. That's what they've been saying. So wow. I'm in for it. I'm just wondering if it's going to be. I mean, I don't know.
All right,
they're going to have to lose the 28 gimmick. Anyway, we have yacked about this forever. I would say if you're listening to this, go absolutely check out 28 years later. And And feel free to tell me that I'm full of shit and half the movie's out of focus. I don't agree, but I'm going to go see it again and pay close. Like when I see a movie the first time, it just washes over me. When I see it again, I'm usually paying attention to that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, great. I can't turn that part of my brain off, so I always see things that way. Anyway, Ben, let's get to the interview with Adam Newport-Berra.
Here we go.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
I'm joined now by Adam Newport-Berra, the cinematographer of The Studio, hit Apple TV series. Welcome to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Nice to do it in person.
Yeah, this is really a lot of fun. When I found out that you were in the greater Portland area and I was in the greater Portland area, I was like, why should we do this via Zoom? We should like get into the same room, and here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome. I never get to do these in person, so it's fun.
This is ideal. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. One of the most interesting aspects to me of The Studio is art imitating life, life imitating art. And the show does this so well and brings in so many insidery things, and I think makes it relatively accessible, but it continues over and over and over again as themes through the show. Like one of the things in episode 2 is they talk about the bookend, when in episode 1, we've just seen the bookend. We've just seen this incredible bookend with the Paul Dano, gangster movie at the beginning, bookended by Seth Rogen talking about, the best teacher he ever had. So talk to me a little bit about the consciousness of the art imitating life, life imitating art throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, Seth does love a bookend, and he says that quite often. And I think there's one in probably almost every episode. So I think a lot of it really came down to the writing and the material. Seth and Evan are very smart. They've been doing this for a long time. They know what they like, and they leaned into that in the writing. So I think a lot from a filmmaking perspective, it was really reflecting a lot of what was on the page.
I mean, I mentioned bookend just because it's really like that becomes a big moment in episode 2 with the callback when we just had that in episode 1. But there's all sorts of like insidery sort of like moments and things, and like, for example, this won't be obvious to everyone, but for a lot of people, especially in the industry, shows about the industry is not exactly their jam, because usually they get it really wrong. Usually it's a weird fracturing. The fracturing that the studio does, I would say, cuts in a self-reverential way that is deprecating, and that we can all laugh at ourselves, sort of thing. We can all recognize the ridiculousness. And I think it's great that it's done at the studio level, but at the same time, it happens across every single portion of this. There's a dig in pediatric oncology about Entourage. And I think you know exactly the line I'm talking about, where one of the doctors says, "Oh, did you watch Entourage, or did that cut too close to home? Was that hit too close to home?" And Matt Remick's response is, "Entourage is a show that was loved by millions of people," which is exactly the sort of self-referential industry put down that people always do when there's a show that's popular but isn't necessarily well liked. And
Totally.
so I'm thinking about like moments like that really permeate the entire series. Every single episode probably has something, but I didn't know if this was like a conscious discussion, or even in your job, your position, of how you were feeling, like how are we best going to represent this, or how are we going to pull this? How are we going to, you've got all of these themes, including the movies inside of movies, or the shows inside of shows, but also, and obviously with things like the oneer and framing and everything else. But talk a little bit about how you guys wanted to skewer Hollywood in a way that's accessible to everybody.
Well, I think every episode kind of sheds light on a certain aspect of Hollywood, or a certain experience that Seth or Evan have had, and I think it was really important that Seth and Evan had these experiences, and that's something they talk about a lot, as a fact that they've been through everything that's been on the show so far to some degree. So a lot of it was working off their past knowledge and past experience, and then obviously everyone on set had some similar experience or had witnessed something that they could bring to it. So it was really just about, with every episode, really exploiting whatever we could that we were showing. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it might be helpful to have like a specific example if you're thinking of something.
Sure.
But no, I think it was really like, it came very naturally to do what we were doing. And I think everyone had something to say about it.
Okay, well, we'll move a little bit into the world of cinematography, because like there's a very famous shot, Steadicam shot from Get Shorty, where car pulls up and John Travolta comes out of the car, and only people who are in the industry realize that the car door isn't there, and then they were following him. There's shots exactly, well, not exactly like this, but very similar, feel very inspired. And I'm thinking about episode 1, where the convertible is pulling up in front of Patty's house, and it looks like your operator must be like sitting on like the trunk of the car or something like that, but then hops off and follows. And then I almost feel like there's the same callback to it, like later a few episodes, where there's another spot that I couldn't tell you exactly off the top of my head, where it's the same, feels like the same thing. Someone in like must have been in quite a precarious position, or maybe not, but camera mounted in a precarious position and then pulled back in this very dramatic fashion. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were always trying to find the most dynamic way to shoot a scene, and it often involved the most complicated way to do things. I think we would block a scene and we'd talk about it, and there were often very simple, obvious ways to do things, and sometimes the actors would gravitate towards that, sometimes they wouldn't. But Seth and Evan and I were always watching to see, how can we make it more dynamic, how can we make the camera move in a way that would keep the audiences interested and keep the experience exciting. So it was often about putting the camera in strange places or right next to the actors, because we were only using one lens, one camera, and not cutting. We really had to use camera movement and composition to keep things exciting. We didn't have other shots to cut to. So yeah, a lot of times we were stuck in a car right next to somebody, and Seth wanted to shoot with all these old classic cars. So we were forced to come up with creative ways to mount the camera. Like you said in episode 1, when we go up to Patty's house, one of our camera operators, Jesse, was just sitting in the trunk of the car on an Apple box strapped in, and Seth drove the car up. When the car stopped, Mark ran up, grabbed the camera off Jesse's shoulder very gingerly. Jesse basically barrel rolled out of the car. There were grips that were disassembling the rigging inside of the trunk, and then another grip with the trunk ready, so once they disassembled it, he could pop it on. Obviously it wasn't bolted on, he just kind of rested it on there, so that by the time we come around the car, we notice that the car, we don't see any of the rigging, and we try to do that as much as possible. Sometimes we had to paint things out just because we didn't have the time to de-rig something in the shot, or we just knew we were going to do more than one take of it, and it would have taken hours to re-rig it. So we tried to be judicious about when we did things practically versus leaned on VFX to paint a rig out. But I mean, there wasn't a lot of like theory that went into these ideas. It was literally just like, how do we make something that feels as anxious and panic-stricken and as intense as we want the experience to feel? And usually that was moving with the characters, moving through spaces, and finding ways to just keep the momentum of a scene going. So we really, like, Seth and Evan don't talk a lot about theory or philosophy. I think that they are very good at giving me keywords of how they want something to feel, how they want something to look. We spent a lot of time looking through images and talking about references. I built like 100-page lookbook for them when I first met them to just kind of spew out all my ideas and all the sort of references I was thinking. And very quickly they were like, yes, yes, yes to that, or no to that, and this is what we were thinking. And then from there we just run with it. And very quickly we just developed a language and found what worked. Like very quickly we found which rigs were helpful, which rigs were not helpful. Like we started out using a lot of like walk on, walk off platforms on cranes, and we very quickly found that it was really cumbersome and time consuming, and so that's when we switched to using gimbals and magnetic rigs. But yeah, everything was not really over intellectualized. It was really just about how do we keep this show as fun and interesting and dynamic as possible. And then from there, we were able to inject ideas or homages or things like that. For example, the missing reel episode is like the noir episode, and obviously people who watch that, who are into film, will understand that we were leaning into the genre of the film they were shooting. We tried to do more of that. I think there was an idea at one point to do that almost in every episode.
Yeah.
And I think we did that to some degree, but we found that we were worried it would be too gimmicky. And so we didn't lean on that too hard. I think Seth and Evan may want to do more of that in the next season. Yeah, I mean, listen, like we're all film nerds and we love movies. And so everything we do, whether we know it or not, is referencing or homaging something we love, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time we didn't have to talk about it. It's like I would show Seth a frame and he'd be like, yes, that feels good. Or I'd show Evan a camera move and he'd be like, oh, let's just tweak it here. But the guys really like lean on the material and the performance to be good, and then from there we just workshop the most exciting way to shoot it. We don't shot list per se. We would spend when we knew we had a complicated location, we would spend time there and work it out, but the overall approach was quite simple. It was really just, how do we keep this as wild as possible at all times?
And mission accomplished, because leaning into these long takes and these one-ers, you get to really play with a few like old Hollywood tropes, which are great, which are sort of the actor steps out and the stuntman steps in for the pratfall. And I recognize you doing that several times throughout the series.
The
where it's like
switch, yeah.
The Texas switch. The Texas switch is beautifully on display, and there's a lot of fantastic like slapstick too that is worked into the show. And to me, it looks like it's a ton of fun, but at the same time, it's also self-referential, because this is what Hollywood does. Hollywood does all these things. You guys are pulling off the same techniques in the show, and not necessarily drawing attention to them, but everyone who's inside the world sees what you're doing and goes like, that's awesome. That's so great that they managed to work that in. And how much of that is discovered on the day? I'm guessing almost nothing. All of that's planned.
Most of it's planned. I mean, it's funny because I've never been drawn to many pieces that are self-referential. I don't love movies about the industry or shows about the industry. It doesn't really excite me. Like, I find that filmmaking is a way to explore other things in my life, and I find it usually like kind of narcissistic or egocentric to be talking about the industry.
Yeah.
But I think what works about this show and what excited me about it was the fact that it does skewer itself. It is self-deprecating. It does show how absurd our life is, and it was kind of refreshing to be able to talk about that publicly. And also, like, a lot of the people in my life don't understand what I do.
Yeah.
It's taken years for my family to even understand, and a lot of set visits.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends don't work in the industry. So it's been fun to tell these stories and to show people how absurd our profession is, and how much we care about it, and it's really beautiful how there's this like blend of absurdity, but also just deep passion. And I think that's really interesting. And also this intersection of art and commerce. And yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like, there's a lot of slapstick, there's a lot of spontaneous moments. Most of that stuff is planned because it has to be so dialed, but a lot of it is planned on the day. We wanted to keep this balance of like chaos and technical calculation and execution. We wanted it to feel really dialed and really unhinged at the same time. So what we did is we'd spend a ton of time rehearsing, we'd walk through the script with the actors and with Seth and Evan, and we would shoot the whole thing on an iPad, and we would just do it over and over again. And at first it was kind of a strange process for everyone.
Are you using Artemis or something?
We used, I think, Cadridge. Literally my ACs just downloaded it and shoved it in my hands.
And said, there you go.
Cool, great. Because I was doing it with my phone, and I think it became, like, very quickly, it became very obvious that was not very useful because my phone would die halfway through. I have a shitty old phone. And they're like, here, why don't you just use this app? And it had a big rubber gasket around it, so if I dropped it, it wouldn't break, because I drop everything and break everything. Yeah, we would just, the day would start, actors would kind of trickle in. Before then, Seth and Evan and I would often just walk the set and talk about ideas of how the space looked, what angles we liked, what camera moves we could start to work into our scene. A lot of times we would come up with a shot before we knew what the scene was and be like, oh, it'd be amazing to like move through this wall or through this window or transfer from a car into this space. Like, let's figure out how to block the scene so we can pull off that kind of camera move. Sometimes it went like that. Sometimes we'd show up and we'd be like, we don't want to talk about anything until we just see the actors do it. So it was really just feeling a vibe for the scene. And I think that's because sometimes we knew exactly how the scene was going to play out, and other times we wanted to be surprised by what the performance and the actors blocking would do.
And it's an incredible cast, and it's a cast that has tons of improv chops too, but this show does not feel in any way improvised. It feels tight. It feels very, very tight and so rapid fire. And I really appreciate, talking more about the idea of art imitating life, life imitating art. How many callbacks are there to, like, Goodfellas, walking through the kitchen and all these shots and things like that, where you guys mention it in the show. You mentioned Ray Liotta, and then actually there's another moment about it, and like all of these things sort of like one after the other, playing against tropes too. Ron Howard is known as the nicest guy in Hollywood, and then Ron Howard's been on the show. He's been and for him to actually then skewer himself to play the version of himself. And I love that you get all of these people to come on the show. The projects are fake, but the people are real. Mm-hmm. And they're playing then versions of themselves. And I have to imagine that for you must have felt several times while you were doing this about the life imitating art, because you've worked with Zoe Kravitz. Mm-hmm. Zoe Kravitz comes on the show. You've been her DP. You have this whole relationship, and here she is now playing herself on the show. What's going through your brain, like when this is all coming together, and like how are you? You are creating now art based on fictitious life, which is actually the life that you live. And tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were always able to add something to it. Everyone had a point of view, and it was really fun. It felt like a release in a way, because I think a lot of what we do when we're making films feels very precious, very important, very sort of
self-important.
Yeah, but also like dangerous in a way where like we're always taking risks, we're always pushing ourselves, we're always pushing our productions. We're always at odds with how much time and money we have, and so to come onto a set where we have sort of a dialed framework for how we make something, and for people to express how they feel about the industry and their own work is actually like weirdly kind of cathartic and fun. Like Zoe was only supposed to be on for one episode.
Oh wow.
And then she's
in a lot.
She loved it so much, and Seth and Evan loved her so much, like, and it just worked so well that she's like, please bring me back to Vegas. And so they did. And I think it's interesting to watch because, as you'll notice, many of the cameos in the show are directors right now.
Yeah.
And that I don't think was totally on purpose. There were a lot of actors that were asked to be on the show that turned the show down in the first season. And I found that really interesting. I felt like there was a certain insecurity, or sort of like they didn't want to take that risk. Whereas directors just got it. They were like, this is hilarious. This makes complete sense. Let me like roast myself, roast the industry in a way that feels, you know, fun, but also a little like confrontational. And I think that Seth and Evan made it a really safe space to do that, in a really fun space. So it was great. And, you know, it was fun to work with all these incredible directors, but it was also really fun to do it with my crew, who I'd worked on a lot of projects with, and just the crew in general, because people would have, you know, random crew members would have ideas throughout the entire show, and like would watch a scene and be like, oh, he wouldn't do that, or what if, you know, someone like a grip ran in and bumped into that person, or, you know, there's so many cool ideas that everyone had and my crew had. And because we were shooting in this particular style that everyone understood, everyone on set was able to help problem solve, which was really, really special.
There's so many great throwaway lines too that, like, if you're not paying attention, if you're not really on you know, I don't know how many people outside of the industry know who Scott Rudin is. Yeah. And there's this really incredible skewering of Scott Rudin, like in a mention in there too. Something I was like throwing a stapler at their head. Oh, you wouldn't get away with that or something. Yeah. But oh my God, is that like, it's brilliant because it takes like almost no time, but everyone who knows who Scott Rudin is, who knows, understands the story about the abuses and everything else. And actually, I kind of want to talk about that. One of the things the show does so well is explain just sort of like the casual misogyny, the casual abuse, the casual sort of just like absolutely like profanity that permeates pretty much daily life in every sort of capacity. I don't think many people who have worked outside the industry understands that people are actually screaming like fuck my fucking ass, like all the time. Like this is like part of like, just, you know, I don't know what it is about the baby talk about being on set and like all of the vernaculars that, you know, all of the gear and different things have, but just like the way that people communicate is so well encapsulated into the show. The show I guess my question is for you is, I know this is an incredible cast. I know they've got it well rehearsed, but at any time when you're doing these long walkthroughs, is there thoughts of like, you know, it would play really nicely here? You know what the other joke we could work in? Or is it pretty much we're stuck to the script and we're just making it happen?
There was a lot of, the scenes were always made on set. You know, the scripts were great. The material was really strong, but I think that every scene was reworked on set.
Okay.
And the way we would do it is very calculated. You know, like I said, we spent a lot of time rehearsing, and when we rehearsed, the actors would come up with lines and ideas, and often Seth and Evan would just start rewriting the script, you know, and we would
on the spot,
the spot, you know, they'd have their computer out and they'd be rewriting, we'd be reprinting sides, and what we realized very quickly is, you know, actors couldn't just improv during a take because it would completely destroy the speed at which we were shooting the shot. You know, every beat of the show is calculated. You know, my operator would show up every day before me, and when I would show up, and he would just be sitting there memorizing the script, just so that he understood the beats of the scene and what was going to be happening and what we needed to convey. And so it was like music. So what we realize is, and what the actors realize is that they could improvise, but they had to improvise like in the amount of bars they had in the scene, right? It was really like jazz. It's like you have this many bars. I think Seth had this idea, this sort of analogy, which I think is brilliant. It's really just like you have this much time to improvise, and you need to get this information across, and however you want to do it, go for it, but make sure you hit your marks and make sure you don't go over or under, because the operator's whipping to you, holding on you for 3 bars, and then he's whipping off. So do what you will, and if it's funnier than what's on the page, great. But like, know that that's what you have. So there's a lot of pressure to that, but these actors work great under that sort of pressure, and I think that was like a really great formula for how to pull it off.
God, I saw Ike Barinholtz on Celebrity Jeopardy. Holy crap! Do not ever get into a trivia contest with that guy. That guy's incredible.
Yeah.
And how incredibly sharp, and like, I mean, everybody in that cast is so like. Catherine Hahn is so like Catherine Hahn's character. Like, I've never met Catherine Hahn's character, but I've met Catherine Hahn's character. Like, I've met so many people in the industry. It's
absolutely.
like it's so spot on. Yeah.
Totally. No, they're so sharp, and they bring so much to it, and it would have been a disservice to like tell them to read the script, and a lot of times they did because the scripts were very funny, but they almost always had something to add, and almost always made the show better. And it was really funny. The first week, Catherine Hahn kept blowing takes because she would just say something that would either make the entire crew laugh or make the other cast members crack.
Yeah.
Or she would just kind of like go off on a tangent and the camera wouldn't have caught it. And she was really self-conscious about it, and she felt really bad about it. And I think she wasn't really used to how calculated our shooting style was, but once she got it, it was like everything clicked because she figured out how to maintain that level of spontaneity and improv, but like blend it into our pace and our style. And same with Ike. I think Ike is a brilliant improv mind, and Seth and Evan did not want to kill that. So it was really about like being generous with them and allowing them to do that. And we would often find ways to rework the shot if they found something better,
Oh, okay.
So, like we would often do anywhere from like 14 to 20 takes of a shot.
Wow.
The first 4 takes were just warming up. They were useless. I don't think we ever used any of our shot, besides in Vegas where we had limited time, we were always kind of dialing it in around the 8th to 10th take. And then I feel like the 12th or 13th or 14th take was always the best one. But a lot of it was built working up to that. And a lot of times we would shoot the first 8 takes and be like, this is great, but these beats aren't working. And we would sit down and take a break and just talk it through, and oftentimes rework the blocking, rework the marks, talk to the actors. They would voice their ideas. Our camera operator would have some great ideas. I would bring some stuff, Seth and Evan, and we would just kind of workshop it and sit there. Our editor, Eric, was always there, and he would have ideas. And so we would just kind of have almost like a halfway mark, like we would reconnect over the scene, because you're just trying to get through takes as quickly as possible to get the rhythm. But then at a certain point, once you've got the muscle memory, you're like, okay, how can we make this better? So every take was always about how do we make this better, and it was really special to kind of build up to that perfect take each time.
It really sounds like a non-traditional way to pull this off, and the fact that you pulled it off so successfully is really impressive.
Well, it's funny, it's non-traditional, but it, like, when we were doing it, we were like, why doesn't everybody do it this way?
Oh wow.
It was so special because everyone's firing on all cylinders, everyone's bringing 100%. Like, I mean, you've been on set where you're shooting someone's close up and the other people are just like tired and not giving it, or like because they know their coverage is until the afternoon, like in between takes, they're like sitting on their phone, and that's not to blame them. Like a lot of times they're off camera, not doing anything. And it's like, you want to give something to the other actors, but you can only give so much if there's like 10 lights in front of you and you can barely see the other person. So there was something really cool about knowing, for every actor, knowing that there was a moment where the entire scene relied on them in order to work, and the entire shot relied on them. And a lot of actors would get nervous if they were near the end of the shot, because they knew that, like, 8 minutes into the shot, okay, it's going to come to me, and if I fuck up my line, we have to go back to one. So it was cool.
The good news is the way that you shoot the show, I could see, I was very confident on more than one occasion that these whip pans were hiding cuts. Whip here, and it's really effective because done well, it's totally seamless, and no one has any idea. But I have to imagine that because you're getting so many people their chance to have their line on camera, that you do have a few cut points. You do have a couple of options there.
100%. Yeah. I mean, we didn't want to be so dogmatic that we couldn't break it up. And again, at the end of the day, the performances are what make the show.
For sure.
So we really wanted to make sure we protected the performances and protected the takes. So we worked really hard to find cut points and stitches within each shot. And that's something we would identify when we were blocking and rehearsing with even with the iPad. We're like, okay, cool, we can hide, we can wipe here, we can whip here. And we would just sort of identify those moments, and a lot of times we would tell the actors so that they kind of had that in the back of their head. We wouldn't encourage them to like lean into that too much.
Sure, of course.
And no one was like, sometimes during takes on like on a film set, an actor will be like, can I take that back? Like while we're rolling, they'll be like, let's just go back to this line. Let me just say it a couple times. We never did that. We pretty much always went all the way back to one unless we were pressed for time or if we were just totally exhausted. But yeah, we definitely had moments where we knew we could stitch takes together. And again, that was really just to protect the edit for the best performances.
When I was a young teenager, someone approached me about seeing a test screening of a new movie that it was the first test screening I'd ever gone into, ever in my life, in a rural part of Northern California, to see a movie called Weekend at Bernie's.
Nice.
And Weekend at Bernie's, like, I lost my mind. I couldn't believe I was going to see this movie for free, and I was like, I don't know, probably 15 years old or something like that. And the callback, the Weekend at Bernie's moment during the sort of finale episode of the studio, I lost my mind. I thought it was so incredible, and the fact that Bryan Cranston's so committed to it, and with all the slapstick and the Texas switch and everything else, I mean, it's truly a catastrophe you're seeing unfold on screen in the most beautiful way. I'm sure that you guys are so conscious of it, but can you talk a little bit about specifically the catastrophe that is this finale of the studio?
Yeah, that was, I think, art imitating life, and that Vegas just felt like a catastrophe. It's just like, we were in Vegas for 2 weeks, living in the Venetian, the casino is filled with smoke. You're eating, restaurant food at weird hours of the day. We couldn't go outside because it was 120 degrees. I think I went outside like twice, in 2 weeks.
You've got a scene that takes place outside too.
Yeah,
There's
which
the fake
was so
gondola.
brutal.
Yeah.
I think Catherine O'Hara had COVID while we were shooting that.
Oh no.
She was so sick, and we were just like, we're here, we can't come back, we have to shoot. And she was just such a trooper. No one identified it as COVID, but we were like, she is not well. And
oh no.
I mean, we tried to shoot as early as we could in the morning just so there weren't too many passerbys, but by like 8 a.m. it's like 110, 120 degrees.
A lot of casinos do not want to shut down under any circumstances, including for when movies come to town or whatnot. Usually it's like a movie has to take over the whole thing. So I'm assuming that the scenes that are taking place in the casino, that's just like, those are regular patrons just walking by.
It was, we were able to like put up notices, and I think the PAs were able to like usher people a little bit, but we could never like ask people to leave, and the casino was fully open while we were shooting. Which honestly was not a big deal to us. I think it would have been almost more difficult to have to like block that many background, and probably more expensive. So for us, I think it worked, and we were moving so quickly through that casino that I think it was fine. We weren't doing a ton of lighting. It just felt like we were, it gave it a certain like unhinged feel that I think was kind of fun, and did feel kind of catastrophic and wild. And I think by then we were at the end of the shooting season, so everyone was tired. Everyone was kind of frayed in this way that felt very analogous to what was going on in the show.
During the Golden Globes episode, I had to pause it for a second, and I had to do a quick Google search to see, like, did the studio actually shoot at the Golden Globes? And I screenshot it on my phone. I'll have to show you when this is over. But this is why you should never trust AI, because AI immediately said, yes, they absolutely shot during the Golden Globes. And I was like, there's no way. And then sure enough, a little bit further down, it was like there was someone else that answered the questions. No, did not shoot during the Golden Globes, but had recreated the experience of the Golden Globes, yada, yada, yada. And like, can you talk a little bit about, because like, I would say the film noir, Olivia Wilde, stolen missing film reel, plus also the Golden Globes. These were it felt like to me opportunities for you to actually really do a lot with lighting, whereas many other scenes, many other sequences, it felt like it had to be probably more bounce, it had to be more, probably tube LEDs or other sorts of things that you were augmenting because of just the environments in the world. Can you talk a little bit about like when you actually really did get to play and like build the Golden Globes and do that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, with the Globes, we shot at the actual location, and we pretty much only used the lights that were on the location. That's that location that we shot at the Globes. And, we spent a lot of time dialing in the look to balance to our cameras. And then we definitely added some lights here and there. We added some rope lights and some accent lights, but we didn't really hang a lot of stuff. We just kind of used what was already up there, mostly because of time and money. It was just there, and we were like, why would we change it? But we did set looks for the show versus when it went to commercial. But we got to do a little bit more with that. I mean, I really tried not to be too fussy with the lighting in the show. One thing we did that was really helpful is we put lights on all the tables, which I think was just helped bring up the ambience in the space so that everything wasn't top light. It was tough because, we have a lot of beautiful people in the show. We have a lot of different types of faces. I wanted to respect everyone and make everyone look good. But at the same time, there's just no way to specifically light people with the kind of camera moves we were doing in the amount of time we had. So I really tried to keep it simple and not overthink it. And I think in a lot of ways, lighting took a backseat to the camera moves, which I was totally fine with. And I think it worked. And I really liked working sort of with broad strokes. I tried not to overthink it because I knew if I did anything too specific, it would tie us into camera choices that couldn't change. And there were a lot of times where very early I realized that halfway through shooting a scene, we'd be like, actually, we want to be looking the opposite direction, or we want to tilt up, or we want to make the shot more dynamic. And I'd be like, well, fuck, I can't do that because I just hung all these lights or put all these lights on this side of camera. So I just very quickly learned not to fuss over things too much and to trust the camera and trust our colorists and to know that we were shooting incredible faces that had great costume design, great hair, great makeup. But yeah, with the noir episode, we did have a lot of fun. We tried to bring a lot of color to it because obviously a lot of the show is like very natural light. So that was a fun episode to lean into color and to lean into more impressionistic light. And what was nice about that is we were shooting on a film set, right? So we could have the lights in shot. A lot of what I did could not have been done if we had to hide the lights. So it was nice to be able to have a crane in shot with lights on it, lights on stands, sitting in the shot. That was great. And, we got to pull out all the stops, wet it down, have smoke, do everything that, we like to nerd out on. A lot of stuff that I wouldn't normally do on a movie because I find it to be
cliche.
Yeah. But we got to, I think it was fun.
But it serves the story.
Exactly. And I think we got to lean into a lot of impulses that we normally wouldn't lean into. And it made it kind of fun. I mean, it was like being a kid at a candy shop,
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, really an unsung hero and someone that you don't necessarily think of a lot, especially, I should just say, I used to be a first AC. I think a lot of first ACs get completely forgotten about, and especially you're shooting the show on a 21. You're shooting on a wide lens. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who think the whole world's in focus. Granted, it's well reported that you're shooting on a Master Prime 21. Master Prime 21 opens up to a 1.3. You can get a very, very shallow depth of field, and there's a lot of playing with perspective, a lot of playing with where is the point of interest. Can you talk a little bit about that dance? And I'm thinking of the only sex scene in the show in particular, and other moments at like the Golden Globes where it's like we very clearly have something going on in the foreground, something in the background, and there's a throw or a moment where you switch perspectives that happen. Can you talk a little bit about
totally.
working with a wide lens and making sure your focus is exactly where you want it to be?
Yeah. I mean, even though we were shooting on a wide lens, we were always shooting wide open. And I was doing that because I really wanted to have selective focus in the shot because the focus was really a storytelling tool.
Yeah.
And because I didn't have other lenses to use, I used focus as a way to change perspective and change composition a lot. And I also really like how that lens resolves wide open. It softens it up a little bit and it gives takes the edge off a little bit. So I really love the Master Primes. I think the contrast is beautiful. The color is beautiful. And when you just go wide open with it, it just takes a little bit of that sharpness off. And there's just like, especially with the texture from the Alexa, it just feels like the perfect level of resolve without being too sharp. As far as focus goes, Lucas Dean's our first AC, did an incredible job pulling focus. And, you know, he was really just a part of the choreography. He was part of that jazz. You know, he had an incredibly difficult job keeping everything sharp, but it was so much more than that, you know, and he had to make real-time storytelling decisions in a scene to be like, who am I going to focus on?
Yeah.
Who gets the moment, you know, because the focus was so shallow, and sometimes the shot would shift. Like, there'd be moments where it was literally up to Lucas to tell the audience what to look at.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool and really special. And a lot of times, you know, we'd be on headset and I'd be screaming at him because I think he'd be on the wrong thing. And then I'd watch the playback and be like, oh no, you totally made the right decision. Fuck. You know, so we would talk about it a lot. And, you know, while we were walking through the blocking, we would be talking about who's in focus, when do we rack, what line do we rack on, you know, what syllable do we rack on, you know, it was really that dialed. And Robbie Julian, our second AC, did an incredible job of supporting Lucas and often called out things that were happening that he could anticipate and just help set marks and hide marks and, you know, be in another corner of the room to watch what was about to unfold so that Lucas could be ready, you know, because if Lucas blew a take, then we had to go back to one, you know, so he was another person that was in this sort of high stakes dance. And him and Mark Golnick, our ACAM, or our only cam operator, they talked a lot, even outside of me, just about how to dial the shot in, because a lot of times I would be off working with Seth and Evan or the actors talking about, you know, something else, or I'd be talking about lighting. So they were always a part of the dance, and every little beat was completely crucial for Lucas to understand and know. So it was fun to see him become a storyteller in that way.
One of the shots that you go back to a few times throughout the series, which starts off in episode 1, is a wide master that slowly pushes into a conversation that a couple people are having. And I'm thinking very specifically of Seth and Catherine towards the end of episode 1.
That's my favorite shot of the show.
It's a fantastic shot. It's a wonderful vista of Los Angeles in the background. But you come to it a couple other times. And I've seen it, of course, used in other things. Again, it's the art imitating life, imitating art. Can you talk a little bit about just like the concept for creating these callbacks, for creating these, like, you know, it gives you a visual memory every time you see that pull out. It's like I know what's coming, and it's this graceful handheld moment of, like, you know, gradually resolving what's happening you know, in front. I mean, look, maybe I'm just over-intellectualizing all of this, and this is just mental masturbation.
And me saying that earlier, I'm not saying I don't like to intellectualize this stuff. It's just how Seth and Evan like to work, and a lot of my process is very interior, and I over-intellectualize the shit out of everything I do. And I really try to, I try to shelter a lot of that from...
Turn that part of your brain off.
Well, no, it's not even turning it off. It's like, I do a lot of that work by myself, and then I find a really simple way to... communicate it to my collaborators. You know, I think I tend not to get too deep in the weeds when I'm working, and I really just try to create a space where the decisions become obvious, and we don't have to talk about references because we've all seen those things and we love them, you know, or it just, you know, because we're shooting it in one shot, it's like, how else are we going to do it? We love this wide, this incredible shot of the location, and there's a fucking rainbow. We have to shoot that. You know, but then we also need... That
was not a VFX then.
That was not VFX. We set up that shot in the morning of that day. We had a bunch of other stuff to shoot, and that was about like 200 feet of dolly track. That was then painted out.
Wow.
We were on a techno crane, on a gimbal, on track, and we had that set up quite early, and it was raining for a lot of the day, and we were kind of sweating it because we didn't know how the hell, you know, we were like, fuck, are we gonna have to move this scene inside? Like, we really didn't want to shoot this scene inside. And so we shot everything else we needed to shoot, and then we kind of just sat there until the rain stopped and the sun began to drop. The rainbow came out. We're like, oh my God, this is it. And because we loved the wide, but we knew that this was like maybe the most emotionally resonant moment of the entire season.
Yeah.
We needed to be in close up. So it's like, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start wide and we're going to end close. You know, it's there. I think we made very strong decisions early in the process. We're only going to shoot with one camera. We're going to shoot every scene in one shot. We're going to shoot with one lens. So it kind of funnels down your choices and your options on set in a way that I think is really special. I think people work best under pressure. I think we make the most creative decisions when we're limited. You know, I came up shooting indie movies where we really didn't have a lot of resources, and I still think that's some of my best work. I find that when I have too many resources sometimes, or a filmmaker has too many resources, you can get kind of lost in the sauce, you know,
Sure.
and shoot too much coverage or do too much, when in reality there's a really simple way. So I think Seth and Evan were really smart to make those really strong, big decisions early on. And you know, we were smart about talking about what references we liked, and beyond that we were like, cool, let's go. You know what I mean? We weren't sitting around looking at, you know, a wall full of images, which I love to do. We just kind of got it right away, and we all knew that we had a lot of experience in this industry and had seen a lot of things, and that everyone had good taste and good ideas, and we kind of just went for it. So like, I don't think there were a lot of times where we're like, oh, that's like a shot from that movie, you know?
Yeah.
It's more like, yeah, of course, because like
It was the obvious choice.
all we do is watch movies. You know what I mean? It's like, and then sometimes later on we'd be like, oh shit, we just ripped off that shot. Oops.
Well, it's really fun too, because, and again, you know, with your own personal experience in life bleeding into this work, I think it's the pediatric oncology episode where one of the doctors says, oh, there's nothing really good in movies anymore. It's all on television, like The Bear. And like, you shot a couple episodes of season 4 of The Bear, right?
Yeah, well, I shot the pilot. I started that show.
Oh, you started that show.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. So
Yeah.
it didn't even like click in my brain. Like, as I remember your name coming up there a few times.
Yeah, no,
so.
I started The Bear. And it's funny because that whole moment is a dig on The Bear.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I honestly, I don't give a shit what people like or don't like. Like, people's taste range is so wild and all over the place, and
The Bear's pretty beloved, though.
it's a beloved show, and I love it, and I'm really
There's
proud
millions
of
of people who love The Bear.
it. It's true, yeah. But like, people are weird, and I like that people like lots of different stuff, and I'm like, I don't care what people's tastes are as long as like people are respectful, and you know, I mean, I guess who cares if people are respectful? It's just like,
At the end of the day, it's a TV show. It's a movie. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in TV. I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in movies. What I do think is important is that like, projects are allowed to be made by their creators, and I think the best experiences I've had are when the creators are allowed to make what they've been allowed to make. And it's incredible how rare that is. And it's incredible how complicated the production process can be from a development standpoint.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I think that the studio talks a lot about that, how like, you know, producers and studios can really get in their own way so much. And I think we need to go back to leaning into auteurs and filmmakers and people who want to make strong decisions, because I think so much of Hollywood has become this machine generating projects that are created in sort of a democracy, and art is not a democracy. I feel very strongly about that.
Here.
And I think, I mean, it's funny I say that as like, when the studio was very collaborative, and the fact that Seth and Evan worked together, it's like there's no ego. But
they
like,
established their team of like-minded individuals. It was
Exactly.
not like, you
Yeah.
know, they had
Yeah.
a bunch of people challenging them.
Yeah,
on
and
this.
they're very, you know, they're very inclusive, and they're very adaptable, and they really welcome input, but at the same time they're very clear about what works and what doesn't work for them, you know, and I love that, and I love the leadership that comes from that.
Well, you know, you and I, we were talking just before sitting down here that we met pre-pandemic, long time ago, and I saw The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I've seen your name come up in the credits from here and there, and been really paying attention to when I see your career, continue to march forward. And you've had a series of, like, let's just say, maturing through all kinds of really, really great TV in particular too. And I'm thinking of stuff like Euphoria. You got to, to do the capstone, finishing a season of Euphoria, Outer Range, lots of varied different types of shows, different types of looks. Do you feel like there is something that defines your personal style when you approach things? Is it all about the project and the director's vision? How do you and the work that you do intersect?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Some people say they'll see something and they'll be like, "Oh, Adam shot that," or like, "I recognized your hand in that." And
I could never tell you that because I feel like all your stuff is like a chameleon.
I feel the same way. I mean, I can obviously recognize it, but like, I don't understand why people can. And maybe they're just being polite or nice. But for me, I think what I would say my style or my technique is just all about the director and all about the project. I just get excited about working with people, and I think the material is brought alive by that collaboration. And obviously, good material is important, good scripts are important, but it's really about who's making it and if we click. And so for me, it's like my dream and my goal is that every project feels like a unique tone that's like specific to that director. And like that to me is the most special thing. It's like, my father built houses, like custom homes, for a living, and his work really ranged kind of all over the board. But what was special is that every time he completed a home, it was a collaboration between him and the homeowner, and it was something that they could call their own, and like it was their home. And so for me, I kind of like see an analogy there where I just really want to come away from a project being like, I pulled that off for that person and I helped them say something in a way that only they could say it.
Yeah.
And I obviously will have like certain tropes or certain things that are consistent in my work, mostly because I might fall back on certain things that I know because I get jammed in a pickle. But for the most part, I try to make everything feel different and new and really hyper specific to the director I'm working with.
Yeah. Let's just dig into that for a minute before we wrap up here. But like, tell me a little bit about that collaboration and that relationship. Does it start off just with conversations? Does it start off with, I'm sure reading the script, but, when you want to deliver what it is that the director is after, is it a series of conversations? Is it referencing other material? How do you guys get on the same page?
Yeah, it's a lot of conversation, and I think, again, it completely depends on the person. Sometimes it's with a director that I know well and I'm friends with, and I kind of already understand who they are as a person, but usually it's just getting to know them and trying to understand why they're making the thing they're making. So for me, it's just a lot of asking questions and a lot of listening. I think early in my career, I would come in hot to projects, with a lot of ideas and ways that I thought things should go down or how I saw the movie. And fortunately, the better I get, like the more experience I have, the more I get to work with people who are a lot smarter than me. So I really just try to listen and try to be as like open as possible to inspiration, and also open to ideas that I would never have thought of, or that often I wouldn't have thought worked. I'm more receptive to things that challenge me and confuse me than I am to things that are familiar. So for me, like, I love that challenge, and I think like it's important for my evolution as an artist. So it's just asking questions, spending a lot of time talking about the material, spending a lot of time with the director, just like as a person and as a friend, and then doing a lot of work on my own. Like I spend a lot of time researching on my own, watching movies, pulling references, and I usually come to every meeting with like a very dense deck of things that I often won't even show in the first meeting. And it's just a way for me to pull ideas and show them like where my head's at. And sometimes I'll show it if I feel like, if I take the temperature of the room, I'm like, oh, I think they'd like this, like, let's dig into it. And then sometimes after the first meeting, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take half those images out, or I'm going to swap some things out, give them the discussions we've had. And then from there, I'll kind of present them with it, and we'll talk about what they're responding to, what they're not responding to, and oftentimes just whittle it down to like a handful of images or a movie or a scene that we love.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so we're both in Portland, Oregon right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get to work locally? Do you ever get to work at home?
No.
Never. You always have to travel.
I'm always
someplace.
pissed off when my friends are shooting here, and I never didn't get the call to shoot. But no, I rarely work in. I probably worked here like a few times in the last 10 years.
Wow.
I shot a movie here like 10 or 12 years ago, which was really fun. I'd love to do it more, but the work is just not bringing me here. It's funny. I've been working in Los Angeles a lot, which is also quite rare. Like LA has been quite quiet for a lot of my friends and for the industry in general. But the last like 3 or 4 projects I've done, besides one in Canada, have been in LA, which is kind of an anomaly. But it's really fun. I mean, LA is a great place to shoot. Amazing crew, amazing gear.
All the
infrastructure is just there. Yeah. It's really special. It feels like Hollywood, and I think the studio is a celebration of that, and I think that's what gets me excited about it.
I agree. In this whole conversation about the studio in particular, with art imitating life imitating art, the episode "The War" really hit home for me. I spent about 6 months working at CAA back a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I also had a boss who was from one of the major studios, and I remember I showed up at 9:03 one morning, and he said to me, "You're supposed to be here at 9. If you can't be here at 9, I'll make your start time 8:57, so we never have this problem again." Wow. And never mind the fact that I had to commute like 90 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
And that in the city of Los Angeles, there's all kinds of things that can happen that are totally outside of your control. Mm-hmm. But I felt like the War episode in particular was, again, like so many things that I think people have experienced, whether they're an assistant or whether they work in studios or work for people in the studio system or whatever it might be. Do you have any experiences like the episode of The War, or something that you can relate to for people that you either worked for or circumstances? Is there anything that hit home for you or struck you when you were working on any of these episodes? But The War in particular was one that really reminded me of life.
Yeah. Well, I want to make a comment on the first thing you mentioned about being late. I think one thing that we say in our crew is, if you're on time, you're late.
Yeah.
And my crew is always early, and they're always there before me. And that's just part of the industry. We're so lucky to be doing what we're doing, and there's a million people who want to be doing what we're doing, that we have to be dialed and we have to be committed, So I think like that resonated for me as well. And this goes back to the being on time thing. It's so difficult to have a career in this industry. Like, I've worked my ass off, for, again, I say short, it's been like 15 years of me just every day being like, what can I do to push my career forward? Even in like the darkest times where I wasn't getting a phone call, it's like, how can I make my own work? How can I literally go out there and shoot something so that someone will see it so I can talk about it? People, destroy relationships, destroy their personal life to get to where they need to be or want to be. And so there's these really precious things that we want to protect, and so it creates a lot of tension, it creates a lot of drama. And I think the trick is like, how do you find that balance of seeing yourself as a human who deserves to exist and deserves respect, but also like is in a very tenuous place at all times and is taking risks. And I think that's what's interesting about this show, is that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to like take risks and stand out and be the best artists we can be, which really is like, it's a very tenuous place to be. It's not a comfortable place. Doing what we do is not comfortable. And so I think everyone on set gets it. And I get it. And it's like trying to, we're always trying to find sanity in the insanity that is our industry.
There's a great stunt in that episode. There's a golf cart where an AD gets hit in the face with a burrito and then crashes into a set and destroys all this stuff. And it's a long take. It's a oneer, and you spin around and you see all of the aftermath. How much of that is practical? How much of that is CG?
Heartbreakingly, the whole set crash is pretty much CG.
Yeah.
We were planning to do it practically, and Seth and Evan were like dead set on doing it for real, and everyone wanted it to happen. Producers wanted it to happen, production designer wanted it to happen. The stunt people were like, let's fucking go. We can get 100 guys to fall off scaffolding, let's do this. It was just so expensive. And it was literally one of those things where they ran the numbers and they're like, this is going to take its own day to shoot, it's going to cost however many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is this really how we want to spend our money for what is like 10 seconds of this episode?
Sure.
And that was a time where Seth and Evan were like, okay, that's fair. We won't do it. And so we ended up shooting a lot of plates and elements. And so I think the VFX team did it really well. We actually even talked about doing it in miniature. And that was the plan for a while, was to do it all in miniature, which was like very exciting because it felt practical, because Seth and Evan really wanted to do everything practically. But again, I think it just like, push came to shove, there were just so many other places that they wanted to spend money and time, and that just ended up not being the place. So we were all super bummed, but like, I think it was, it was just like the decision of a filmmaker, like, this is not where I want to spend my money, so we didn't do it.
Hey, I know we got to wrap it up. Is there a place online that people can find you? Do you do the Instagrams or do you stuff like that?
I'm on Instagram. I don't use it that often anymore because I find it's not a particularly inspiring place. But I am on there, and I do find like can be a fun way to connect with fellow filmmakers.
What's your Instagram handle? So
It's just my name. It's Adam Newport-Berra.
All right, we'll put it in the show notes over at camnoir.com.
Sweet.
Adam, this is so much fun. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Awesome. Right on.
All right, so that was Adam Newport-Berra. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was great talking to you. I can't wait to do it again. Maybe we can do it again in person, which would be great. So maybe for the studio season 2, if that happens.
You guys are both in Portland, so do you do it like on a unicycle, like with handlebar mustaches while you're making artisanal pie or something?
You know what?
That's Portland's like, right?
That's hurtful, man. That's really hurtful. But yes, that's exactly what it's like. Did you know that this week is Nacho Week in Portland? Who knew that there was such a thing? Nacho Week.
I didn't know that. No, why would I know what week it was in Portland?
And you know what? I'll tell you though, it's like they don't go light on nachos here. There's like 50 restaurants and it's a competition, and the people who eat the nachos are the judge. You go around and you rate the nachos. It's like this whole thing. And if you want to enter the contest, you can't sell the nachos that are being judged for over $10. It's $10 is what it is. So yeah.
This really does sound like in Portlandia in the first episode, Fred
exactly
Armisen said that Portland is where young people go to retire. That definitely sounds like a young person retiring move. I'm going to have a whole week about nachos. We're going to have a nacho competition.
Oh my God. There's a soapbox derby that people get into. There's a 500 lap race around a block. There's all kinds of like Portland stuff. Like Portland, you know what it's got going? It's got introverts and it's got whimsy. We got both those things here. Yeah. Introverts and whimsy. All right, but Ben,
we're all extroverted and super serious here in LA. Anyway.
Yeah, the extroverted part's true. Anyway, so Ben, it's time to pay the bills. We got to thank our fine friends over at Venus Lenses, Laowa Lenses. They Venus is the parent company. Laowa is what people know them as. You can look up their really cool website, which is lawacine.com. And of course, you can buy all your Laowa lenses over at Hot Rod Cameras. I got to talk about this new zoom fisheye lens. You don't usually think of fisheye and zoom going together. And Laowa's done something really cool. I would say that they price a lot of their lenses for creators. And this, I feel like, is very much a creator lens, especially people who are doing dance videos and doing other types of like, in your face, social media sorts of content. At 8, on a full frame camera, it completely gives you that spherical effect. It, gives you the complete vignetting all the way around. But when you zoom into 15 on a full frame camera, it completely fills fills the image area, which is something you don't usually see. So the lens is available in a lot of different mounts. It defaults in PL. It is a cine lens. It is called the Laowa 8-15 T29 zoom fisheye cine lens, and it retails for $13.99. This is not an expensive lens, but a very, very cool lens with really on-purpose distortion effects that you can set anywhere in that distance. And on a crop sensor camera, or what you might call a Super 35 frame, it's not going to vignette all the way around. You can choose whatever sort of look that you like. It's also available in Canon RF, Sony E, Nikon Z, Fuji X, and L mount available. There's some great videos online, and it's a constant T29 aperture, and it focuses, like many fisheye lenses, extremely close. So if you were doing a music video or doing anything where you had, like hands or faces stuff coming close to the lens, it is going to be still in focus and have that super distorted effect.
We should call Hype Williams right now.
I worked on a lot of music videos back in the day that used these, fisheye lenses were not as cool as this one. So anyway, the Laowa 8-15 T29 Cine zoom lens, pick it up over at Hot Rod Cameras or give Hot Rod Cameras a call. We can get that lens for you in any mount that you would like, and it's super fun. Check it out.
Very cool. That sounds awesome. I want to see that.
And now, short ends.
It is our short end time of the show. It's where we talk about our pet obsession. What is your pet obsession this week? What are you thinking about?
Unfortunately, this is an obsession I can't, no one else gets to go do this right this second. But eventually somebody will. Because I live in LA and we have, right now, we're kind of lousy with retrospective theater. So there's the New Beverly, there's Vidiot's, there's the Academy Museum, they're all over the place. And one of them is the Vista, which is owned like the New Beverly, owned by Quentin Tarantino. And, but they show first run movies there as well. But every once in a while I'll go what's playing at the Vista? And yesterday I looked and David Fincher's film Seven was playing at the Vista, which I saw on the big screen in 1995. Because I'm elderly. And then 30 years ago, by the way, 30 years since that movie came out. And then, I've seen it on home video a bunch of times. I think I owned it on DVD back in the DVD days. And, but I hadn't seen it on the big screen in a long time. And I went to see it so I don't know so for those people who haven't seen it or aren't familiar with this movie, Darius Kanji shot it, who's also on my personal bucket list to get on the show. I think he's one of the best DPs around. He's been working forever, but I love his work. And he blew people's mind on this movie by doing bleach bypass. I think it was one of the first times that I think it was called the ENR process was used, where when they're cleaning the negative, they skip the bleaching and then the silver retention happens in the negative. So they also did a limited run of prints where they did the same thing.
Well done, Star. You got through that. I was going to say you could have just called it silver retention and left it alone, because there's all these different specific lab proprietary processes. But well done. You got through the technical mumbo jumbo.
Well, and hopefully I didn't lose everybody in that, because we try not to get too technical here. But anyway, so they did they weren't able to afford in a wide release to do all their prints with silver retention. I don't know why it costs that much different, but apparently it cost a lot. But at the Vista Theater, they had a 35 millimeter print from 1995 that was one of the Darius Kanji supervised silver retention prints. So they had done a bleach bypass on the negative, and then they did another similar silver retention pass on the print. And let me tell you, that movie has never looked darker. Holy shit. I was like, did they take the lens cap off the projector? I'm lying. There aren't lens caps for projector movies, for movie projectors. But, and at the Vista, they
shutters.
They show
shutters.
Well, that's true. There's a dowser that you would, use to kill light. And there probably actually is some kind of a cap that you put on the projector lenses. But anyway, it was freaking dark, but it was also super, super contrasty. And the quality of the print was amazing. I want to see this movie. I don't think that any of the video releases, which they could make it look like this for the video release. They could grade it for the video release to make it look exactly like this. I don't think any of them have looked like this. I haven't done the Pepsi challenge with every 7 video release, but it just freaking looked amazing. The only thing that I would say that dinged the print, and I feel like it was something to do with the silver retention in the print process, because it's so old, is that in some of the reels, the blackest blacks would get this weird red noise pattern that was very obvious. But other than that, it was like one of the cleanest prints, and it wasn't in that much of the movie. It was a little distracting, wasn't the end of the world. And I've often said when I go see a film show, like I saw Goodfellas in 35 millimeter there, and when I left, I'm like, man, I would have rather seen a really clean DCP of Goodfellas than a slightly beat up print, because it's just distracting. And I completely reversed myself on this one. And actually, when I saw Miller's Crossing a few weeks ago at the Egyptian, another great retrospective house, like that print was pristine. And I don't think I would have rather watched a pristine DCP of that. But with this, like with Seven, like that movie, like I think it's exactly as powerful as it was when it came out. I think it's aged better, because I think at the time Brad Pitt was kind of seen as like this pretty boy from Legends in the Fall that people were trying to make him look grungy. And now that we've lived with Brad Pitt for 30 years and we kind of know what he's about, you see the acting he's doing in that role. And Morgan Freeman is just amazing. Every actor is amazing, but Darius Kanji's cinematography is just some of the best, I would say some of the best noir cinematography of all time in that movie. It was just the most entrancing movie to see in the theater. And it would be great if they did a 30th anniversary re-release of it and took the whatever it was, the silver retention print as the template for how to make it look on the re-release, because it just looked amazing.
I remember seeing that movie. I did not see a silver retention, and it was a dark movie, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. But I heard from people who did see the silver retention print. They said it was a real unique experience. I'm glad you got to have that experience again. Super cool.
Yeah, and if you visit LA, definitely go to one of our amazing retrospective movie theaters, and the Vista. If they're doing retrospective screenings, definitely check out the Vista. It's such a great theater. If you saw the movie True Romance, the movie theater that Clarence and Alabama meet at the beginning of that movie is the Vista.
Nice.
And then Tarantino bought it
a few years later.
Yeah, like 25 years later. Anyway, Ilya, what is your pet obsession of the week?
Well, this must be the nostalgia episode or something, because I am also rather nostalgic this week, and except it's for a television show. So a long time ago, in the early to mid 2000s, I was working for a rental company, and that rental company had a lot of big television show clients, including Fear Factor. Fear Factor was my client, and when I inherited it, I basically got all of the really, really most difficult and complicated stuff that was going on at that time. I was kind of like the air traffic controller of gear. Basically, they put a lot of responsibility on a few number of people at the company, and I had to be responsible for couldn't even tell you how many pieces of gear. It was a lot. It was a ton of gear. Now, I got to learn how the sausage was made at Fear Factor a little bit, both from a technical perspective and also from a creative perspective, because I knew all the people who were working on the show, and I would go to the rap parties, and I met Joe Rogan and all the other stuff, from that time
So you could have stopped him, and you didn't. Anyway, go on.
I couldn't. But, Joe Rogan at that time was the guy from Fear Factor. He wasn't he wasn't the Joe Rogan he is today. But I saw recently that Fear Factor is coming back. In fact, Fear Factor is coming back to Fox this year. It's going to be back 2025, 2026, and it's hosted with, I have to say, I think this is inspired casting, Johnny Knoxville. Johnny Knoxville is going to be playing the Joe Rogan, and I got to say that it makes a lot of sense, because there's not too many stunts or tricks or things that Johnny Knoxville wouldn't have done himself at one point in time, including getting shot by a real gun wearing a bulletproof vest, which no one's ever seen that footage. But yeah, that was the original audition tape for Jackass, which I've talked to people who've seen it, and they say, holy crap, they understand why that's not on TV. But man, that's something right there. Anyway, Fear Factor, I actually have wondered many times why it hasn't come back. It was a beloved show for a long time. I understand that, ratings.
You can only watch people eat a live tarantula so many times.
That's true. They usually weren't live animals that people were eating, but it was almost always, some sort of delicacy in another country that just Americans didn't find palatable. So, but the fact that it's back,
poutine. Anyway,
poutine is delicious.
It is.
Poutine. Can't knock the poutine, man. That's good stuff. Anyway,
that was the essence of my joke. Anyway, go on.
I'm in Portland. Poutine's a thing. It really is. It's a thing.
Is there Poutine Week in Portland?
Actually, I haven't run into Poutine Week. It's not like nachos. I probably could. Yeah, I probably could. Anyway, but beyond all that, Fear Factor. I'm kind of interested and curious to see what the update is, because I feel like the world of the internet and social media and the creator economy is so much sort of like prank and like, can you believe that somebody did this sort of Fear Factor-esque stuff these days, that I think that there's an element of, will it feel super tame and out of place? But I know there was a Fear Factor channel like on deep cable, like Pluto TV for the longest time, that just showed reruns of Fear Factor forever. I don't know. Will they up the ante? Will they try to make it even more like, shock and awe compared to what it used to be? It remains to be seen. But Johnny Knoxville, great casting. It's sort of a guilty pleasure of mine. I could not watch it every week back when it was on, back when I was involved with it. But I have to say that I appreciated what they were able to pull off, the way that they pulled it off. And it was a tremendous technical feat to make Fear Factor happen. I have no doubt it will be the same this time around.
They're just going to shoot it on the iPhone.
You're probably right. Probably an iPhone. Anyway, so Ben, that's going to do it for this episode. How can people find you if they want to track you down?
You can go to benrock.com and check out my stuff, and find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on all the social. I'm even on TikTok. I just don't really use it, but you can find me pretty much any of them. Just look for Ben Rock. There's a few of us. I'm not the only Ben Rock in the world, but I'm definitely the only one who's a filmmaker that I know of. So you'll find me there. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
They can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. And also this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you can find me in Munich, Germany at the EuroCine Expo. I'm going to be in booth number 100, hanging out with the new Betty reflector system. So if you're going to EuroCine Expo and you're a fan of this podcast, and we have listeners in over 200 countries now, I think is what it is. Yeah, come on down and say hello. I'll be there. I'll be there all 3 days. Okay, so Ben, who made this show possible? Who do we have to thank?
First and foremost, as always, Alana Cody, our producer, who kicks all the ass, gets all the guests, rides both you and me to do all the work that we do.
As a producer should. Yeah.
I'm not saying that she doesn't do. She does way more than we do. way more than we do. But we got to thank her. We got to thank Charlie Nix, who's slicing and dicing, and he got on this episode, he got to see a guest shot of my son shirtlessly walking in, eating an ice cream cone and talking about Dogman. Thank you for cutting that out, Charlie. But it was fun. Hopefully it warmed your heart. And last but never least, we got to thank Kay Zalatrakshy, who composed every bit of music that you hear on the show. Go to YouTube and check out his channel at Kay's Labs and see him fix synthesizers. That's really what he wants you to do. You can also check out his website, musicbykays.com. You could also hire him to compose your next score. He's great.
And you know what? Hey, if you liked the show, do us a favor. You're still listening right now. You're still listening to the sound of our voices. Write us a review. Go to, subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit subscribe on every podcast platform thing.
Don't smash it though. I don't like the smash when people want to. Don't be violent to your phone. Don't smash the like. You can gingerly caress the like. That's fine.
Or send it to a friend. I think this interview with Adam Newport-Berra was great. There's probably a friend of yours that liked the studio. Share it with them. Share them. Share the podcast. Share the love. Send it around. Let people know that we exist. Yeah. All right, and follow us on the social medias. I mean, we're on the Instagram. We do the Instagram stuff. We even do some LinkedIn stuff. So, follow the show. All right,
do it up.
Ben, you want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.